Hi, and welcome to the Early Retirement Roadmap Podcast, the show where I help you prepare and design a life you love after work. I'm Mike Upland, an early retiree at age 55. Today we're tackling the million-dollar question, sometimes quite literally. How much money will you really need to retire? Did you know that 47% of retirees worry about outliving their money per the AARP? Whether you're planning to retire early or not, having the right number can make all the difference between financial freedom and constant worry. And the answer of how much you need isn't a one-size-fits-all, and yet it's the most critical question for anyone considering early retirement. In today's episode, we'll explore the key factors you need to consider, common mistakes to avoid, and strategies that can help you retire confidently without running out of money. I'm particularly qualified to guide you through this topic because I successfully retired early at 55, and I've learned quite a bit along the way. So let's dive in. But before we do so, let me be clear that what I'm sharing today is based on my personal experience and research. While I'm excited to share these insights with you, this is for educational purposes only. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with qualified financial, tax, and legal professionals before making any investment or retirement decisions. So back to our topic. Retiring early is a dream many of us share, but it's not as simple as picking an age and quitting your job. To succeed, you need to answer several critical questions. How much will you spend each year? How long do your savings need to last? And what factors, like inflation, healthcare, and lifestyle changes, could potentially derail your plans? Let's start with spending in retirement. This forms the foundation of your entire plan. How much do you think you'll need annually? $40,000, $80,000, more? Here's the truth. The amount you'll need depends on the lifestyle you want. So you really need to think about that as part of your retirement planning. For instance, do you dream of traveling the world in retirement? Let's break down expenses into three categories. First, you have basic living expenses. These are things like housing, utilities, groceries, and transportation. Second is you have your discretionary spending. These are vacations, hobbies, dining out, and entertainment. And third, you have your unexpected costs. Medical bills, home repairs, helping family members. A great way to start is by looking at your current spending over at least the past year or starting to track it if you haven't been. This will give you a baseline to figure out how much you may need annually in retirement to maintain the same lifestyle if that's your goal. And tracking it for at least a year will give you a comprehensive understanding of your spending patterns. This duration allows you to account for periodic expenses and seasonal variations, providing a more accurate baseline for your retirement budget. Also, for discretionary spending, when you're figuring out how much you expect to spend annually, you may need to bump this up from what you spent in your working years. This is because you'll have more time than you did before, so you may travel more than you normally would, and that was certainly the case for me. Or because in retirement, you may want to pursue hobbies or passions that you didn't have time to explore in your working years. And for unexpected costs, this is why having an emergency fund is essential. For early retirees, it's wise to have an emergency fund that covers at least 1 to 2 years' worth of living expenses. This reserve serves as a safety net for unexpected costs and helps you avoid withdrawing from your investments during market downturns. Keep this fund in liquid, easily accessible accounts like a high-yield savings account or money market fund. Once you understand your spending, the next critical step is ensuring your money lasts as long as you do. None of us has a crystal ball to predict our lifespan, but we can plan conservatively to address that unknown. Here's something that shocked me during my planning. If you retire at 55 like I did, you might need to plan for 35 to 40 years of retirement. That's potentially longer than your working career. Ask yourself, what's the longest possible time my money could need to last? Then plan for that number. Trust me, running out of money at 75 is a nightmare scenario you want to avoid. Now let's talk about inflation. It's the silent wealth eroder. Here's a practical example from my own life. When I started my IT career in 1996, the national average for a price of a gallon of gas was $1.23. Now it's $3.06. That is a 149% increase. Here's a sobering fact. With just a 3% inflation rate, $50,000 today will only buy $27,684 worth of goods in 20 years. Imagine the impact on your retirement if the cost of your daily expenses doubled or even tripled. This is why you can't just save a lump sum and forget about it. Your investments need to grow to outpace inflation, which typically means keeping a portion of your portfolio in stocks or other growth-oriented investments. And don't forget, inflation impacts some expenses differently. For example, healthcare costs often rise faster than general inflation. This is a major expense for early retirees who aren't yet eligible for Medicare. Be sure to include these rising costs in your calculations. They can significantly impact your savings. Now for the moment you've all been waiting for, how to calculate your retirement number. Here's a simple formula to get started with a caveat that I'll get to in just a little bit. Take your annual estimated spending and multiply it by 25. This is based on the 4% withdrawal rate, a general guideline from the FIRE movement. It states that you can safely withdraw 4% of your savings each year, adjusted for inflation, without running out of money for 30 years. Here's a couple of simple examples of how it works. Jane plans to live on $40,000 per year. Using the 25 times expenses rule, her target savings is $1 million. She will receive $200,000 in Social Security benefits over her anticipated lifetime, reducing her savings goal to $800,000. Then we have John. John wants to travel the world and spend $80,000 annually. He owns rental properties valued at $500,000, which will generate $20,000 in annual net rental income. This reduces the amount he needs his savings to cover to $60,000 per year. Using the 25 times expenses rule, John would need $1.5 million. He expects to receive $300,000 in Social Security benefits over his lifetime, which would reduce his savings goal to $1.2 million. These simple examples show how different lifestyles and income sources affect your savings needs. Also, flexibility is key. Jane could decide to increase her discretionary spending for a year, while John could sell a property to access more funds if needed. Now here's the caveat. The 4% rule and the 25 times annual expenses rule assume a 30-year retirement timeline. If you're planning to retire early, you might need to adopt a more conservative withdrawal rate, such as 3.5% or even lower, and save more, potentially 30 to 35 times your annual expenses. This helps hedge against market downturns and helps to ensure you won't outlive your savings in a potentially long retirement. Also, the 4% and 25 times expenses rule should be treated as a general guideline or benchmark to evaluate if your assets are potentially large enough to support early retirement, because it doesn't account for the reality of what happens in life. For example, what if you have a large one-time expense because you want to help pay for your daughter's wedding? It also doesn't account for spending more in retirement during the years when you're younger and you're more active versus your spending decreasing as you get older when you're not as active, or other situations such as expenses associated with long-term care or assisted living. It's also based on historical averages and assumes steady growth, but sharp market downturns, especially early in retirement, can significantly impact your portfolio sustainability. It also doesn't account for tax treatment of withdrawals from different accounts, for example, Roth versus traditional IRAs versus taxable brokerage accounts. It also doesn't account for any legacy goals you may have. You may have a certain amount of money that you would like to leave for your heirs after you pass away. So your own retirement planning will need to really dig deeper than the 4% and 25% annual expenses rule. To do that, I highly recommend using a comprehensive tool like Bolden.com, and that's spelled B as in boy, O-L, D as in dog, I-N.com, that I use myself. If you want to think of it as a TurboTax for retirement planning, they do have a basic plan that is free to try, but ultimately, if you're really serious about this, you'll want to consider getting the Planner Plus that costs $120 per year after a 14-day trial, but it's worth every penny because you can run different scenarios and stress test your portfolio. Whatever planning you do, at the end of the day, I recommend you consult with a financial advisor to talk about your unique needs, and they can validate the planning you did as well. Always best to get professional input to make sure you haven't missed something and to take a second look before you make such a big decision as to early retire. The other great thing when you meet with a professional is validation. I was over the moon when my financial advisor confirmed my planning and agreed that I was set for retiring early. So to wrap up, here's your action plan. Number 1. Calculate your annual spending or start tracking it if you haven't been. Number 2, account for potential changes in retirement expenses. For example, more discretionary spending in retirement. Number 3, add some buffer for healthcare and unexpected costs or anticipated one-time large expenses. Number 4, multiply your total spending by 25 or 30 to 35 times for long-term retirement. Number 5, adjust for other income sources and inflation. 6, test your plan with different market scenarios and life situations like long-term care expenses. As mentioned previously, a comprehensive tool like Bolden.com can really help with testing different scenarios and stress testing your plan and give you a projected probability of success under each scenario. Early retirement is a journey, and it starts with great planning. Remember, your future self will thank you for the work you're doing today. That's all for today's episode of Early Retirement Roadmap. If you found this information helpful, please leave a review and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also catch the video version of this content on my YouTube channel, also called Early Retirement Roadmap, if you want to see the examples I gave and tips in a visual format. Until next time, this is Mike Upland reminding you to take care and make the most of today.